Good evening, everyone. We'll get started. If you have the folder before you, on page 9 we will do the prayers before the teachings. Page 9 and 10. These prayers, if you have not understood what it means, in Buddhism we have a person becomes formally Buddhist by having refuge or having confirmed as one who accepted the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. Buddha is the enlightened one, Dharma is his teachings, and Sangha is the community of living traditions. So as a formality, all Buddhist activities, such as teaching like this, begins with a prayer called refuge. And also generation of intention called altruism, that you are listening to the teachings not for oneself, not for just tonight, not for just these few days, but for the benefit of all beings and for the benefit of all future times, probably past too, but a bit too late. Definitely benefit of now and in the future. And with that inclusiveness, I'm going to listen to these teachings. So the first verse is mainly about formal refuge, reconfirmation of the refuge, and reminding of the altruism, whatever one does. If one does for oneself, that's usually problem where all the problem begins. Even it's a good activity when we do for ourselves. In the end, the self-centeredness becomes a cause of problems. So here, even taking refuge, one does it, even listen to the teaching, one does it for the benefit of others, that we may be a little bit kinder. If we are benefiting others. If we are gentler, we are benefiting others, and so therefore it's good to know that we are not doing for ourselves. That makes the spirit a little bit more alive, more motivated. When we do for ourselves, we do it when it's convenient and don't do after that. So therefore, when you have a cause, you tend to hold the vigil longer. When you don't have a cause, you don't go to the vigil at all. So here the generation of the thought of enlightenment, and then generation of loving kindness feeling, compassionate feeling, and joyous feeling. And loving kindness, because if we have ill will, it's very bad for ourselves. So loving kindness remedies ill will. Compassion, because compassion is a very powerful practice in the face of seeing suffering all the time. Often we don't cope well with suffering because we have aversion to suffering. Compassion is not an aversion to suffering, but embracing suffering, which challenges us so that our act of compassion empowers us to be not overwhelmed by sufferings, but it become a benefactor of our compassion. And so therefore we generate compassion. Joyfulness, even the Buddhist teaching says life is full of suffering, but it's not about thinking life is pessimistic, suffering, and then be aversive to that. Amidst all those suffering, our life is many times blessed. We must recognize that, and therefore we find a joy to stay alive, make a difference to those who are not quite well, quite not in our position. And therefore joy is found amidst the suffering, in serving others who are not quite coping well, that we have legs, that we have eyes, we have freedom. The others haven't got legs or eyes or freedom or whatever. So we find, we can make a difference. So the joy comes from that, because otherwise suffering gives a feeling as if it's all not worth it. So joy is important. And then equanimity is even more important. Even you practice, but if you get your practice become lopsided, become too attached to to aversive another, and we become pulled apart, and we could break into pieces by this. But equanimity empowers us to have degree of kindness even to the hated ones. If possible, not hate anybody. And also equanimity towards the attached objects or people. Even with them, we know that we can't completely change or control, make them perfect. They too have their own journey to do, so we take a back step. That kind of equanimity is very powerful, otherwise we get caught in the attachment and aversion. So this reflects, these prayers after the refuge, it reflects those important sentiments. And then on the page 10, the special requesting the teachings, because in Buddhism it's a taboo to teach without being requested. Taboo meaning you're imposing on people. So you're not allowed to say that you should have this teaching, but teaching should be requested, at least in formality. That is the case. Because they say when the cup is open, then you can pour in it. The cup is not open, you can't pour. If you do, it's all spilled. So when somebody is seeking, then they'll find the teachings. So the Buddha himself didn't teach unless he was requested, even though he was enlightened. He was humble. He didn't want to impose his teachings on others unless they requested. So likewise, in the Buddhist tradition, that it is therefore observed that kind of formality. So then we invoke the actual the knowledge in listening and hearing the meanings of the words and texts of the Buddhist teachings. And so with this, that's just brief introduction to these prayers, and now we'll do these prayers on page 9. First chant in Tibetan, the two verses, the verse in twice, and then once in English, as they are indicated there. O Zanje Jada Zoje Jana La Janja Bada Dane Jazanje Dage Jenye Jeba De Dage Dala Benje Zanje Draba Jo Zanje Jada Zoje Jana La Janja Bardo Dane Jazanje Dage Jenye Jeba De Dage Dala Benje Zanje Draba Jo. In Buddha, the Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of listening to these teachings, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. Zemje damje dewa daen dewe gyuda dembara gyuche dunga da dunga je gyuda dravara gyuche dunga mebe dewa da me drava gyuche nyere jada nyeda drave Tanya la ne parajoje. May all living beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separated from the bliss that is all is. May all living beings live attachment and hatred towards near ones afar, but living with equanimity. May all living beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separated from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings live attachment and hatred towards near ones far, by living with equanimity. Zemje namje sambada loye jeda jeda jejo tomoe debaye Cheje Ngala Gordo In accordance with the disposition and intelligence of sentient beings, we request you to turn the Dharma wheel of greater, lesser, and common vehicles. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlightenment, intelligence, and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and texts that explain them. Then we recite this mantra 21 times. Idea is to bless, in my case, my speech, so that what I speak becomes not only temporarily pleasant, coherent, succinct, penetrating, wise, and relevant, but at the same time that has a power to implant the seed of knowledge and wisdom there is in the body of the teaching to illuminate the mind of those who pay attention. And so therefore with this one recite the mantra. In your case as listeners, that your auditory consciousness, like other four sense organs, usually very selective listener or selective looker, often not have the capacity to choose the right seeing or choose the right hearing. Often between two persons, when one talks to the other, they often misunderstand a lot. The person who says something, but the person who listens hears it completely differently. Lots of misunderstanding. And that's partly due to the unpresent mind of the listener, an unpresent mind of the speaker perhaps, and as well as other causes or conditions, whatever is a background noise that's happening in their lives, in their minds, and it can color the hearing, can color the speech, and so on. So therefore our hearing is often very, very unreliable. It hears the wrong things. It doesn't hear complete things or properly. So, but when one is fully attentive, with a good heart and good, what are we talking about, with good altruistic motivation, and listening for not just oneself, not just for this evening's enjoyment, but for a knowledge and wisdom that our actual mind and life hearing needs to be exposed to such sane, wise, intelligent, useful knowledges. For knowledge empowers only if we have it. And how one who heard knowledge that are reliable has more power to contemplate on that knowledge, and one who has the power to contemplate of such valid knowledge has a capacity to implement. One who has the capacity to implement the knowledge they heard, they have the benefit of experience, use of the knowledge, and validation through benefit, that how much they are more skillful, less harmful, and more beneficial. And so that's why, with this in mind, when our attention is put together, the benefit of hearing teachings comes not just for the power of the speaker or the knowledge, but also for the good heart and sincere, attentive and positive intention of the listener, whose intention is not just for themselves, whose intention is for others, who could be anybody with such intention. So we may enlightenment, intelligent wisdom, it says, so that we may gain insight into the Buddha's words and texts that explain them. The concepts, in this case, concepts and topics that we will discuss tonight. So let's recite that Om Arapachanadi 7 times, so 21 times, while focusing on your tongue, the energy glowing and radiating your awareness. Omara bhajana di amara 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 Omara bhajana di 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 So, the topic during these 4 sessions, of which one session we had last week, is looking at the very important 4 Buddhist themes called Four Seals of Dharma. Seals meaning something that is unbreakable. If you put your signature to it, you honor that. You're bound by that signature, and you honor that, agree with that. And so it's usually it means you agree to it. That's truth that you have. You honor it. Likewise, a person who is intellectually, ideologically, philosophically Buddhist, usually are someone who are party to agree to these 4 principles, 4 seals of Dharma. Not only they are party to agree to these 4 seals, but their own life become better guarded by having these principles, because they will ideologically and intellectually will view their life and its going on with this universally binding understanding. So last week we talked a little bit as an overview of the 4 seals, particularly a little bit more on the first 2 seals. Tonight we're going to specifically look at the first 2 seals. Firstly, the first seal is that seal meaning the principle. Principle is not just principle that we agree, and if we don't agree, it doesn't affect us. This is, even if we don't agree, they affect us. So we might as well agree to it. So, which means that the one who agree and acknowledges these principles, then they become a little bit more guarded and guided by these principles in so far as ability to embrace life and its difficulties as they so present. First seal is that all unsatisfactoriness, stems from afflictive emotions. Yeah. Or Sanskrit called dukkha. It's all dukkhas, or meaning bad things, all difficult situations, all problems in lives, all problems in life, particularly physical and mental problems are largely comes from afflictive emotions. Now, if we are able to agree to this seal, if we can put our signature to it, saying we really agree with that, the difference it means that then we will not be whinging so much. We will not be complaining about lives, because that is the nature of life. So, but if you accept that as a nature of life, it's like saying this water is so fluid. I can't handle this water. It should be like a rock or something. If we're resisting with the nature of water is fluid, But one who understands the nature of the water, use the water for what it's good for. Likewise, one who knows the nature of afflicted emotions are unsatisfactory. Firstly, it seals us. It seals means it prevents us from blaming non-causes of suffering as the causes of suffering. Actual cause of suffering is our own afflictive emotions. It wastes not time in apprehending or misapprehending non-causes as the true causes. So usually we have a tendency to lay blame on people or places or one thing as the cause of our misery. But this empowers us to see this unsatisfactoriness largely stems from afflictive emotions. Afflictive emotions has a powerful to obscure us, and obscure meaning it makes our ability to see very unclear. It obscures us, fact from fiction. And because of that, it doesn't allow us to know consciously what we're doing and what we're thinking might be the primary cause of suffering. We are not aware of it. So afflict means it obscures us, it benumbs us, it basically makes us intoxicated. When people are intoxicated by anger or desire or jealousy or righteousness, whatever is the afflictive emotion can be maybe, then it obscures them, and then they are not aware of what they're doing to themselves or to others, and yet they think their unsatisfactoriness came from somewhere else, something else. So this kind of misunderstanding often makes people to fail to recognize the true origin of the misery. True origin of misery. We call in Buddhism the origin of the truth of the suffering. The true origin of suffering. True origin means if you do recognize the true origin, then you will not be finger pointing to non-origin or secondary origin or pseudo-origin of sufferings. You rather pay attention to the root origin, isn't it? You want to know what is the root cause of the problem. And so when you are party to agreeing that all afflictive emotions are the root cause of suffering, when you go and look for that. So the ability to recognize the afflictive emotions is not an affliction. Not an affliction. Inability to recognize affliction as the root cause of suffering is an affliction of an affliction. So not only affliction is self-suffering, but affliction of affliction becomes even more of a cause of suffering. So to recognize affliction as affliction prevent us from the state of unconsciousness, and then it seals the problem from surmounting, problem from escalating. As soon as we recognize that, we can put a bar on it, so to speak. That's of course if you have a good ability to recognize that. But first, one must, through say all of our life experience from the early childhood till today, maybe even last 5 recent years of experiences, we have been always maybe externalizing our sufferings to people or places or events or things more than to our own desire, to our own egotistical mind, to our own anger or ill will. We hardly are able to recognize this being a primary role. This may be caused by the others type of thing. Even our afflictions caused by them. I get angry because he did this to us. So we justify our anger. So we feel quite righteous, quite okay to feel angry. That our anger is allowable. As if there is a catalyst out there that actually is the primary cause of it. Now, there may be some truth in this, because if the object is also afflicted, of course the instigator is also afflicted, so therefore the afflicted afflicts another. So they're mutually inclusive afflictions, makes both unaware of each other's affliction, and therefore causes so much suffering. This understanding empowers us to have compassion to both, not seeing one as a victim and the other as a perpetrator. What a great relief that it is. It seals us from, I'm the victim, he is the perpetrator. It thinks not anymore like that. It sees how both are mutually afflicted. Maybe one by desire, other by anger. One by jealousy, maybe other by miserliness, or maybe both by miserliness, or whatever it is, or ignorance, or jealousy. You could see, when you see both are equally afflicted, then both person become the cause of the knowledge, and the affliction is the actual poison that needs to remit it. No, none of the two persons should be suffered, should be punished. The affliction should be removed from both of their mind. So to punish people is no removing of suffering. It's adding to the suffering. Because the adding of the suffering, punishing people usually is done by affliction as well. So affliction does not remove affliction. So therefore, when we say all afflictive emotion causes suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So now coming back to what is unsatisfactoriness. There are three types of unsatisfactoriness in Buddhist teachings. This is very universal. There are suffering of suffering, that is called affliction. The suffering of suffering is usually where a person or beings are having severe sufferings, that they don't have any break from the suffering, because everything they do to remove suffering is also motivated by affliction. And so and everything one does to remove the other suffering is also motivated by afflictions, and afflicted emotions causes more afflicted karma and aggression. And so it, instead of relieving the suffering, it reduplicates the suffering. So this kind of suffering means whatever one does in hope of relieving suffering. The intention is not questionable, but method is that you cannot remove ill will by ill will, or by war. But you cannot stop war by fighting the war. You should try to practice some ways of relieving the cause of the war, greed, or whatever it is. If say even within one person in their own mind, they are warring with themselves, they're hating themselves, they don't like themselves, and they don't know how to make peace and accept themselves, and give some encouragement, give some self-appraisal, and talk to them nicely, and remember some recover some lost positive memories of oneself. They're constantly bashing. On top of other people's criticism, one's self-bashing. If one is doing that, that is so unconscious of unconscious. So that's, even as a human being, usually Buddhism says that human beings don't suffer suffering of sufferings. We wish they weren't. But suffering of suffering is done on an extreme negative level, where a person is really aggressive, profoundly depressed and angry and hurt and resentful. And not just for little moments or little days or weeks, few moments, but weeks and weeks, years and years. They're really angry about the same thing so many times, and they don't realize how debilitating that it is to themselves. And they still think they have 10 million reasons to be angry, and they will be rewarded soon. And they have this belief as they will be rewarded, if not by law, at least by God. They have this amazing feeling as if they will be rewarded for being so angry, so deluded. This delusional license to feel okay to be angry is what we call suffering of suffering, because it is generating affliction and with affliction. And then it does not bring a break at all. It doesn't bring any kind of break. It's ceaseless, perpetuated. It's called samsara. Samsara means perpetuate vicious cycle. Vicious cycle probably is the best word, best English word for a Buddhist concept. A vicious cycle, it's called. And samsara is the actual Sanskrit word. In Tibetan, the samsara is called korwa, means cycling. So vicious cycle is the word, cyclical existence. Vicious cycle put a tone to it, what the cycle is. It's going round and round and round, and hardly no remedy is found. most sentient beings, particularly in lower realms, such as animals and ghosts and hell beings, are constantly in the suffering of sufferings. There is no moment that they have a really break. So human beings who are not intelligent, who are not exposed to truth and the way of the enlightened ones, may be in human form, but mentally, psychologically, emotionally, could be living in one of the three lower realms, three psychological states. That is like a hungry ghost. Like hungry ghost is like a person who always sees whatever he has not sufficient, always discontented. What he has, what he hasn't, everything is wrong. He's always looking, seeking, and craving, coveting everything outside. Have little or no contentment in the things they have, they are. That's physically a person is human being, but mentally, psychologically, it's a hungry ghost. So the person may have a nice house, person may have a job, a person may have all the things that everybody call dream life or dream home or whatever. Person got all the things they want, but still no contentment. And as a result of this, a strong poverty cycle of mentality. So that is the affliction of craving and coveting, and therefore desiring, and therefore discontentment. And that might reflect in their education, in their looks, in their positions, in their relationship, what they are, where they live, what they do. Their discontentment manifests in everything. And so they are actually still regurgitating, still despairing that discontentment. That is basically hungry ghost in human form. Very pale, very poor inside. Have much, but very poor inside. So that is like inner kind of emaciation. You are psychologically emaciated by this meanness, by this povertiness, by this inner destitution of knowledge, of contentment and graciousness, makes the afflictive emotions of craving and desire and greediness just predominates their life and mind. And therefore, loved ones like parents, however much they have showered, they couldn't see enough has been done to them. They still feel litany of complaints towards them instead of gratitude towards them. That's called afflictive emotions are the root cause of sufferings. This is the suffering of suffering. Human beings are, however, because they are live with other human beings, they can see comparatively, they can become exposed to knowledge like this. Therefore, they can terminate the suffering of suffering. Animals, hungry ghosts, hell beings, they cannot terminate their suffering. They have no power to listen to teaching. They don't have freedom. They're constantly in the run, and never a moment of peace or tranquility or sanity. Whereas human beings, particularly those who have fortune, good fortune, live in very free society, equality, education, and there's law, good rule of law, freedom of spiritual, freedom of gathering and expression and practice, and freedom of spiritual knowledge. And where there is, people may be exposed to knowledge and then learn to make their suffering of suffering change, shorten the duration. That's enough poor me mentality. It's just trying to decide to think well and wealthy. Feel I'm free. That's most highly pressured. What's the benefit of wealth if you have no freedom? Isn't it? If you have freedom, that's far more precious than wealth. So if you have freedom to think and choose your way of thinking without bounded by fundamentalist religious ideas. This is why His Holiness Dalai Lama these days propagates harmony between all spiritual traditions, not talk about who's good and who's wrong. Talk about how everybody must learn to rejoice each other's goodness and the contribution they offer, and not discuss the differences, but the commonalities. Then our world is very rich. It's like a buffet of spiritual practices. you can choose and not criticize the dishes you don't like yourself. Take that away. I don't like. There are lots of people who in the crowd will. So rejoicing each other is much more abundance. One is very lonely and miserable. Lonely stone, they call it. To think only one is the one way to go and it is the only right is the cause of all conflict. Many is so good. Many makes democracy possible. Democracy means rule of many, not rule of the one. No? So spiritually also, when we have a body of knowledge that is many, then it can give us to army to fight the wrong dictator in us, the deluded, craving, dictatorial, selfish mind. And the teaching of the Dharma put a rebellion against this and makes us well, so that we cannot be put up anymore under the suppressive regime of ego. And hence, the seal of Dharma moves on. They're saying that all afflictive emotions are the root cause of suffering. So the suffering we talked about, that there's no break. Second is suffering of change. Now the suffering of change is the more constant in human realm. Even suffering we can change, meaning we can lighten them up, we can shorten the duration or velocity or intensity of it. We can talk, we can listen, we can have a good discussion with a little bit intelligent person in your circles, or listen to the teachings, read the books. You can actually no longer have to suffer like that. You recognize the affliction as affliction. Human beings can do that because we have the discerning power. That's why listening to the teaching is a great gift to oneself. It could not measure the benefit if we really prize it slowly and apply what we heard in everyday life situation. And then we will not point finger to things as the cause of suffering anymore. We could actually see the cause of suffering is the affliction, such as egotistical mind, greed, hatred, jealousy, pride, and so on. Whatever are benumbing and making us unconscious. When you can see that, then you will realize that you can actually put an end to the afflictions, because affliction themselves, although has a direct cause of causing suffering, but they are not permanent. So the second seal of Dharma is that everything is impermanent, which is very important. If you agree to that, you say everything is impermanent means it's not just believing everything is impermanent, that you make them impermanent. So it's believing in this second seal of Dharma makes us as human beings to understand suffering of change. Even sufferings doesn't have to be permanent. They are not permanent because they are created. Whatever is created is necessarily impermanent. Because if it's not, something that is permanent cannot be created. Cannot be created. So therefore, creation in Judeo-Christian idea of creation is problematic. If particularly creator is a supreme being, a creator is permanent, and created is also, how could it be permanent? So therefore, this whole idea that our problems are created by someone else becomes such easy to prove it wrong, because we can uncreate it ourselves. If someone created, we have no say. See, this is why it's possible we can change the object
because objects are not objects, they are our thoughts. If it's afflicted, particularly if we know it's our afflicted thoughts that we are seeing the objects, we know how to distinguish the object from our thoughts. Our thoughts, object manifestation of our thoughts. Then we can change the object of suffering. Say we don't like somebody, but we thought it was the object that we didn't like. But as soon as you know that it's your affliction that is making the object look like that, so it's the object is not object. Object is our thought manifested in the mirror of the object. Then we can change the perception of the object because we can change the thought about the object. This means even suffering, our own suffering, is subject to change, because even suffering is a thought, Suffering is also afflicted thoughts, remember? So the affliction is not some kind of eternal sin. Affliction is just a conditional mind, a mind that is very, very unreliable. Unreliable, childish, unreasonable, irrational mind is afflicted. When the mind is recruited and taught and slowly guarded, it can grow up and become mature and know and how to drop that thoughts. Now, more Buddhist doesn't mean person is come to changing into religion or something. Buddhist meaning more awake they are, the more mature they are, the less vulnerable they are to afflictions. And they can decondition afflictions. They're just like you have a deodorizer in your body. It's like you have a de-afflictor. You have some kind of awareness that affliction doesn't stick on you very long. Your mental awareness. And so therefore you can see that even though afflictions are the cause of the misery, but the afflictions themselves are also impermanent. Not only that, particularly people and things and everything around us is impermanent. So this idea of knowing everything is impermanent and being able to therefore change our sufferings. If we know our sufferings, first truth is truth of suffering. If you accept the truth of suffering, what makes us do is, if you accept the truth of suffering, because truth means fact. Life is basically unsatisfactory. Why? As long as mind is afflicted. But it doesn't have to be unsatisfactory if it's not afflicted. So therefore, do you want it afflicted or not afflicted? When you can change your mind from afflicted to unafflicted, the suffering is terminated. So suffering is terminatable. How long does this effect of a particular event affect to different people is how apt we are to apply the antidotes to become awake. Buddhist means to become awakened. Whether one become awakened, if you want to wake up at 6:30, you put the alarm 6:30. You put a 4:30. If you want, so how long you want to be so sleepy about that issue? You don't want to in that dark, cold place, so long and cold night. You want to get up as soon as possible from that. So instead of giving in to that anger, giving in to that self-hatred or misunderstanding or jealousy or righteousness or something like that, because one can recognize them very clearly, the afflictive emotions. And then one says, look, I don't want to spend more days or hours in subscribing to these afflictions, because longer I subscribe to this, that much severe my own suffering it makes. Now this is very responsible. When you're aware of that, the person over there or events over there is quite free of your views. Now the subject is, now the ball is on our court. Is what we do with our affliction, whether we change it. If we are aware of the affliction, we definitely will learn to remedy that. It's the non-recognition of the affliction as the root cause of suffering that makes our suffering so long and drawn out. So the truth of suffering is recognized. Now the origin is apprehended. When the origin is apprehended, now you will not be misapprehending non-origins. It will give amnesty to people or places or things. And it's such a nice thing, to give amnesty. But you have to have moral, intellectual authority to do that. You have to have a rational mind that knows when does the change occur? When does the change occur for you to give? When? Is it because it's a Sunday the 20th, or it's a full moon, or when do you decide to give an amnesty to people? Is it because of Queen's birthday? That's happened only once a year. That's way too long to wait. We should be able to bestow amnesty every day of the day when the sun rises. Every day we should have overcome one fear if you are on the path of awakening. That is if you understand suffering of the all things are impermanent. You don't just believe everything is impermanent. Buddha said it or engrave it. No value there. You got to do the thing that is impermanent. Change attitudes. Drop the views. And replace the views. Replace the views. And see the benefit of the replacement of the views. Not just replace for the sake of replacing, Like people put another fresh coat of paint on the wall and feel they're good, Even that gives them some good feeling, but not the kind of artificial cosmetic changes. Deep down, one's thought and feeling about it, you have the authority of the freedom. You have the amazing awakening that liberates you from what was otherwise suffering by one's own affliction. Now that affliction has become apprehended. He's not allowed to offend. He's not allowed to re-offend because he is not himself. He's not himself. He's not a single entity that exists from its own side. Even afflictions do not have a thing called itself. The affliction is not in the glass. Affliction is not in inanimate object. Affliction is only in the animate mind. Only its mental states. And when the mind knows affliction, it's not affliction anymore. It's only the unknowing. It's the unconscious state of the affliction does the harm, cause the harm. It's just like spread of a virus. It didn't realize the person was too close to the person who has a virus or whatever. When they didn't realize they were too close, they didn't realize they were catching. Unconsciously contracted. Even physical virus, let alone mental virus. Affliction is a mental virus. Mental virus. And it needs a good eye. It's not the physical eye. It's not a glass. It's not a binocular. It's not a microscope. It's the awareness, metacognition. It's cognition that is super intelligence. In seeing the effect that it has to the mind when it is seized by this virus. It's just like a physical body that's seized by illness. You can see it just completely makes the whole physical body not perform, how it makes the body go pale and energy not being produced. Likewise, you can see how unbright, how unkind, how selfish the mind is. When you begin to see this, you can see the virus is there. So when you become more cognitive of the afflictions, then you're doing the thing that is impermanent. Then you're making them impermanent. Previously we didn't know they were there. Or now we recognize they are there. That is making it impermanent. Now when you recognize the virus, then the duration of the virus and how long it lasts is now numbered in hours. It's a good idea to have the feeling of, oh, wow, we have apprehended him. He's there. So you've apprehended. Previously we've been
firing at the wrong object, barking at the wrong tree, all this time. That is waste of all the energy and that is also done by affliction. All the searching and punishing and all is done by affliction. So the karma that it creates is just vicious cycle indeed. Like the war that is fighting in any way in the world, particularly Middle East. Just whatever they do, it only creates more problem. They think they stopped that one, but didn't realize they were going to cause another one. And gone from bad to worse. Like that, on a kind of individualized scale, if one looks at our own degree of anger about a subject, for instance. As soon as we realize it's my own anger, my own impatience about the issue that is making my behavior towards it and towards anybody quite unacceptable itself. How could unacceptable behavior like this correct another unacceptable behavior? As soon as we recognize that, we will restrain. We'll exercise restraint. That ability to exercise restraint is what is the seal of Dharma, second seal of Dharma. All things are impermanent. You don't just believe in them, you're actually making the impermanent. Now, that requires... So therefore, when we say seal of Dharma, it's not merely subscribing to it, not merely signature, putting, but actually cognitively stay present in learning how to do that in everyday situations. So it's a constant sort of state of awareness that is implemented. And effect of the implementation of any of these seals, let alone two, even just one, makes the person more light-hearted, freer from the misery, and less of vindictiveness and resentment and an attachment towards one's own views or towards others or things. You see them all as objects of care, when you have to carefully make sure that one remedies them with this knowledge that all things are impermanent. And then the big subject in Buddhism, in the law of the second seal of Dharma, is not just impermanence, but impermanence of not only of things, but impermanence of life itself. And death is considered. Death is considered as a big remedy for most problems. Think of dying and death, and what does the problem means to you then? You might as well forget about it. You're going to be dead before you can solve the problem. And often do. People spend years to solve a problem. And look at the war, they fight years. Many have died for nothing. And they're still dying for nothing, and they will die for nothing. And they don't realize how life itself is impermanent. Now, this is not to think that everything is looking everything with pessimism, but that's what change means. Change means something doesn't last. That includes life itself. And so when you consider the impermanence of things, you not only look at impermanence of matter and consciousness, between inanimate object to living sentient beings. And then you start looking at everything. Every day you witness impermanence. You can see the impermanence of the nature, the landscape, the weather, what society used to do, the way they used to do, what they used to do, what they're not doing. You can see the amazing change that is so many things were, but they're no longer anymore. They're just even not in the memory of most people. Those days it was really important, but nowadays it's just not even in the memory. So yet lots of people are living in the past. They're angry because they're still in the past. So therefore they're not making them impermanent. They're making them as they're permanent. So all sufferings that we talked about before comes from the affliction of clinging and grasping to impermanent things as permanent things. Very erroneous view. And then that person, they're hating somebody for what they did 20 years ago, as if they think it's the same person. Look at the person, biologically, he's not the same person. He's taller, he's weaker, he's not the same person. Society only gave him one name, that's the problem. He should get one name every day. And then you would notice he's not the same person. Physically, emotionally, the person has changed. You can see his shoe size is different, his address is different, his body weight is different, his ideological beliefs are different, hopefully. And his situations are different, his positions are different. You know? And he wasn't a father, he's a father. He's about to become a grandfather. You can see that the person is having many labels now that he never had before. You can see the impermanence of everything. When you are able to witness the impermanence of everything, then you also become fitter and wiser to make impermanent. You no longer hold those afflictive emotions. Instead of feeling angry to our mother, for instance, or father, or brother, or sister-in-law, just see them. They actually are object of my gratitude. I have lost memory of all their generosity and kindness. If you really consider carefully, they are objects of gratitude. And they are the difficulties that we have with them is not because they didn't care for us, but they did everything for us. So, do we now feel not grateful to them? Because we have spent quite a great big deal of time being ungrateful. What did we get from that? The outcome is not good. So who wanted to reconsider that? When you really look at carefully, try to see the lost and unrecovered memories of the positive things they did to us. And then you can now change. You don't just believe in impermanent, you actually make the views about them impermanent. Head of our perception, our own perception about them impermanent. Buddha said that one who thinks of impermanent in the morning makes everything in the morning's activities meaningful. Because he wouldn't hold them as real. He will see them as a transient phenomena. And if he thinks of that impermanent in the afternoon, his afternoon will be easy. If he thinks in the evening, his evening will be easy to let go. If he thinks about the week, it will let go the week also. So because being able to remember that everything is impermanent is said to be more meritorious than offering the whole world filled with flowers and beautiful objects to the Buddhas. He says, don't offer me flowers when you can make things impermanent. So this is honoring, thinking of impermanence as a meditation is honoring all the Buddhas, is accepting the Dharma, is meditating the Dharma, is living the Dharma. Because then you have power. You are now recruiting an intellectual institution that will apply this seal. Apply this seal every time, and then think of the opposite. That's exactly what it means. Think of the opposite when you look at an event or object or subject. Think of the opposite, and then you will make it impermanent. If you're angry, the opposite of anger is kindness, intolerance, tolerance, jealousy, rejoicing, unforgiveness, forgiveness. When you start doing that, then you try to make them impermanent. Not only try to make them impermanent, by thinking of it, it does. It will make impermanent. Because what you bring in your thoughts, they become the reality. When you know things are impermanent, and you know what are the important things that you should be aware of impermanent things. Firstly, physical body itself is impermanent.
attitudes, feelings, abilities, skills, knowledge, stamina, energy, interests, friendship or lack thereof are all impermanent. Look at the many friends that you have. They no longer are there with you. Not because they left you, because they died. They just couldn't have enough time to continue the friendship. Their body wouldn't, the elements wouldn't support their existence. So they are no longer there as an object of anger or attachment or love, because their very physical entity is absent. So it's an illusion to think there is an enemy or person who did this to me, think and then feel justified to feel angry. That they don't need to be perceived in that way. Those who are signatory to the second seal of Dharma, that everything is impermanent. And you remember this seal of Dharma. Seal means principle of Dharma, that everything is impermanent, and impermanent is from matter to consciousness. Here we have to become learn to make impermanent of unconsciousnesses to consciousness. Even meditation is done so that we are empowered to do these things. Even prayer is done so that we are able to do these things. Prayer is not an end in itself. Prayer is only means to be able to do things that are impermanent. They said, drop it. They said, drop it. Forgive it. Let go. These are just specifics of what you do, but actually means make it impermanent. Make it impermanent. Means change it. Don't wear the same clothes every day. It's soiled. We don't feel good in wearing soiled clothes. That's why people have many clothes in the wardrobe. Not just to look good. They say, change of clothes. How about change of thoughts? How many change of thoughts do you have in your suitcase? Not just one or two, but specific issues. How many change of thoughts do you have? You should have 360 degrees about one thing. We are often stuck with one miserable degrees view, and we think that's the only view that we have of the object. We don't realize they are variable 360 degree view, and how veritable a feast it is that you can choose 360 degree views and then realize that no one view is correct. That shows how your views are changeable only by what the object is, but what the position you are at. When your position is seized by affliction, then your view of the object is dictated by that, your awkward posture. So this maneuverable position is called middle way, is called flexibility, is called giving space, so that you don't get stuck in one position. Your view about how you were treated by others. You're only looking from that one point of view. Poor me. What I didn't get. We're always thinking of poor me. We're full of ourselves. That is the affliction we're talking about. We're talking about his point of view, the supervisor's point of view, the boss's point of view, these other colleagues' point of view, all the other people's point of view. What is the view of them? When you begin to inform with more views, then you might realize your one view was a little untenable in this situation. See, then you can make your view drop. Otherwise, we're so devoted to the wrong view. We didn't realize it was wrong view. See, affliction disempowers us. It doesn't allow us. But when we can make even afflictions impermanent, you see, so then you're not just ideologically believing in a principle. You're doing the Buddhist thing. You're doing the awakening thing. Buddhist doesn't mean a particular culture, Because if you think the Buddhist thing, the Japanese do one thing, Sri Lankans do another way,
Tibetans do another way. A Western Buddhist think they should do another different Western Buddhist, They don't want to do any particular ethnic, cultural Buddhist way. They want to do their own Western way. The actual Dharma is not outwardly, could take any form. Internally, it must have these principles right in the center stage. Then you will awaken. Then it will benefit you from. It will put an end to the duration and the nature of your suffering. Why? Because then, as soon as you know the first truth, the first seal of suffering, when you are signatory and agreeer to this first seal of suffering, you realize, even though all sufferings, my own included, all comes from afflictions, but my share of afflictions is far lighter due to my good karma, due to good condition being a human rebirth, unlike the lives of others, unlike the lives of other humans in third world countries, where the people basically don't have the time, the luxury of time to read, listen to such teaching. They just can't do enough to just feed themselves. They don't have basic medication. They don't have basic this and that. So the benefit of knowing that the suffering is that amongst all the beings who are afflicted and suffering, I am among the few who are fortunate. I can make a difference to those who are less fortunate. Then, instead of being depressed and overwhelmed by the sufferings of life, our life suffering becomes a lot more tolerable, and other suffering becomes a cause of then compassion, genuine compassion. Then it is Dharma. Dharma means medicine. Then knowing suffering and its truth of suffering and its true origin is a medicine, because it empowers you to show compassion to those who are suffering. But otherwise, when we show aversion to suffering of people are made by their karma, their karmic situations, what they did, they don't want it to have suffering. But their karma dictates them. They don't know how to change karma. The affliction holds them at ransom. And they're not aware of it. So when you see the pitiful nature of sentient beings, then you show compassion. You don't try to punish them for suffering. So because of that, so most people are not really genuinely party to the signatory to the first seal of Dharma. You can see how hard it is. They usually straight away say, how dare you do this? Straight away. Sentient beings are dictated by the karma and afflictions for which they are not cognitive or conscious. Like under alcohol, person doesn't know what they're doing to their life or car or their purse or whatever. Likewise, people who are under the karma affliction, they're not aware what they're doing, but we think they do. We think they're doing deliberately. No, they don't. We have been there, done that. So how can we possibly punish them for being a sentient being? So sentient being suffering is the sentient being suffering. These are Buddhist topics. If you read a Buddhist book, you've got to find these words: sentient being, suffering, affliction. These three words are almost found in every pages. Not a lot of mention of heaven and God or sin and all that. It's just different terminology, You can tell it's a Buddhist book if the word sentient being is found in every few lines. and affliction and so on. So now, good thing about it, see whether you can give a challenge to yourself by attending these lectures, whether you have a good grasp of the first seal of Dharma. If you have, you will look more kindly to yourself and not put yourself like everyone else that are drowning next to you. You will be among those who are at least got a life vest on, still swimming, and being able to You will see that there's no danger of you drowning because you are blessed with precious human rebirth, yeah, and freedom, and in very, freedom of spirituality, and you have able body, able mind. Others are not born with those things. They have complete disabilities, intellectually or physically. Just think of those. Then you realize, I'm a social worker, I'm a carer, I'm a nurse, I'm this. I can see so much suffering, all the places and spaces. And in looking up, comparing to their sufferings, mine is just very thin. It's not even mentionable. So then your suffering doesn't overwhelm you, and other people's suffering doesn't discourage you, but you have humility to accept yours, but have courage to show compassion to those around you. If you're able to fittingly do that, then you have understood the first seal of Dharma. Seal means it seals you from whinging, it seals you from complaining, but it stops you from creating more problems, seals you from stopping creating more problems. Usually sentient beings try to solve one problem, but creates more problems. So therefore very difficult to be a Buddhist, difficult to be Buddhist. Particularly that, so people first take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And first they got to accept this teaching. That's so true. I got to first just say, I accept the teachings. Whether I can do it all well or not, it's a practice, but I will accept. So when you embrace the teachings, you really think about it, it really gives you a solace. If you can believe in it, it's even much more. If you can do it, it's liberating. If you can repeat the doing, it's another liberation. If you can speak it, it's even another liberation. If you can, it's so and so on. So when we talk about seal of Dharma, we see that all the time when people are suffering, some people are suffering, they make a mistake, their karma is catching on them. And very few people will treat them nicely. They straight away throw stones at them. They're supposed to be Buddhist. But they don't understand the first seal of Dharma. The suffering is an object of compassion. It's not of aversion. If you show aversion and resentment to suffering, it creates more suffering. Remember? First seal of Dharma. Affliction does not solve sufferings, so does not remedy sufferings. It only perpetuates the sufferings. So that's the first challenge for Buddhists is, even if one has refuge in the Triple Gem, how do we undertake as we understand the first seal of Dharma? Then with our community, our circles of concerned areas, when they are falling or they're grumpy or they're whatever going through, instead of reacting to them angrily, or if we can practice kindness and compassion, be tolerant and accept them, knowing things will be impermanent for you anyway. For them, maybe it's not so impermanent because they don't realize the damn thing. So even if the person who's intellectually quite acquainted with the whole idea, is not quite coping well, those who are not exposed to these teachings, how would they know? So it's so crucial to have this teaching, meaning teaching means the way. They have the way. You can see it is the way. You can see it's so obvious. If you can just think and just agree to it and stick with it, it will pause us from overreacting. Maybe we have overreacted quite a few times already. And we have already burned a few fingers. We have only got 10, We want to save the rest of the fingers. And so now we are pausing. Now, see, that's the real refuge. Real refuge is not the Buddha. It's the Dharma that we understand. The Buddhas only show the way. And we practice the Dharma. And that is what? Showing compassion to fellow sentient beings. Not overreact to punish each other. And as we can fix the world
by pointing finger to a couple of people and then think the world will be cleared of all of that. People have tried that so long time and never worked. But minding one's own karma and minding one's own perception and feelings, making them impermanent, making some feelings die, making some feelings replace. Ill will become replaced by maybe indifference. Indifference becomes affection. Affection slowly becomes loving kindness, and then goodwill. So there is no ill will that is legitimately, truly, validly necessary to have the ill will. Firstly, it's bad for the person who have it. Secondly, about the subject and object towards with each is. So when the person becomes a conversant with the first seal of Dharma, they know how the suffering is so interminable, so like a vicious cycle. You can make, if you understand suffering of change, means you can actually make things impermanent. So that's the suffering of the second type of suffering. Third type of suffering is very subtle. This third type of suffering is little beyond the scope of discourse, but I can refer to you briefly. And this is called the all-pervasive conditional existence. This means the innate grasping to the notion of I. Notion that I or self. And that's why because it's the third suffering of all conditional, pervasive, all conditional existence, means all pervasive, meaning that everybody has the same sense of I-ness, my-ness, and all sense of existence around us is very much pervaded by this I, this unquestionable I, untested and unscrutinized I, or self. Wherever there is self-grasping, there will be suffering. That's what it is. Third suffering is self-grasping. Self-grasping, as long as there is self-grasping, there will be kind of gross to subtle suffering. Now this is the reason, the main reason, the third seal of Dharma, which we will not elaborate tonight, but I mention that there is no self. Basically, that's the Buddha's statement: is there is no innately existing self. Now we disagree with that. We think there is, and so because of that, this third suffering is constant. Third suffering is constant in everyone. Just merely, I need this. Oh, my car. Oh, my shoes. Oh, it's raining. My clothes. Everything is about I. Oh, what time is it? Oh, already nearly at 9. Oh, it's my bedtime. Oh, my, whatever, whatever. Always this I is the center of this thing, And it's not difficult, not easy to exclude that because this seems so natural. Unfabricated, they call innate grasping. This innate grasping. So the underlying causes of suffering is this innate grasping, unscrutinized way of thinking that there is so-called permanent I. Yeah, truly existing, permanent, independently existing I. So when this kind of fundamentally wrong view is subscribed to, so that is why there is suffering, why there is life, we were saying all afflictive emotions are suffering. There are afflictive emotions of two kinds. One is the afflictive emotions, another is cognitive affliction. This cognitive obscuration is thinking I is self and real and permanent. And then one identifies that with one's body, one identifies that with one's feeling, and one's perception, one's doings, failings, outcomes, success or failures, with self, and one's I consciousness. I saw it. They say, I saw it. They just don't doubt about what it is, because I saw it. So this kind of consciousness, from matter with the form, or the body to the consciousness, these 5 psychophysical components, what we call 5 aggregates, let's list them. Form is the physical body. Apprehending I with body. We don't hesitate thinking it's the body is I. And my feeling, we go, feeling. The feeling is another one. And the third aggregate is perception. Perception, how you perceive things, from sound to smell to taste to touch to form, whatever it is, whatever we perceive. I saw it. And then I did it. This fourth aggregate is all our activities, all our doings. Whether it's a successful one or unsuccessful, or relative, of course, but still, when a person thinks that is me, then that becomes a problem. And then we don't realize how much our attachment to our doings or failings is my doings, or my success, my failure. Then people don't realize this cognitive obscuration to associate self with the doings and failings is the root cause of the afflictive emotions. So you cannot be too effective in ruling out the afflictive emotions unless you can recognize the cognitive obscuration, this innate grasping to the notion of I, either with body or with feeling or with perception or with doings or with consciousness. So these 5 aggregates, the reason why when the third seal it says there is no self, it's not denying the existing of temporarily merely labeled relative self. But it is whatever is relative self is merely labeled. Relative means it's only all depends to what it's in relation to you. It is called, like say, next to your mother, your daughter. Next to your daughter, your mother. So your label is totally relative to who else is next to you, not who you are. So if you're something inherently mother, you'll be mother from since beginning of time. Because your name is temporarily labeled by others, so you're imputed by others as a sister or mother or daughter. If you say, look, I'm mother in front of even mother, then there's a huge problem. So you can't say, look, I'm truly existing mother, not only in front of the daughter, but also in front of the mother. So everything's relative. So all the things are relatively labeled, but they're not ultimately is. They're not ultimately, whatever is relatively labeled are not ultimately itself from itself. So when it says there is no self, means this third seal of Dharma is harder to crack. The reason for that is we still have the first 2 seals not quite able to grapple very well. If you did the first very well, you will have not only ability to be compassionate to whoever are suffering, whatever they're doing. There's no better remedy to those suffering around you by their karma or their collective or their mutual creation of situations. You are not pointing your finger to one to more than anything else. You see them all as like ocean, water of the ocean. Every bit of ocean is salty. There's no point picking one scoop here. This sweet water, try this. This comes from Bay of Bengal. Oh, this water in Bondi Beach is very salty. There's no such thing. All water is salty. Likewise, all sentient beings are basically unsatisfactorily drowned in the ocean of their own karma and afflictions. Because of that, you have this, like your head is above the water. Others are drowning, and therefore you have fitness to develop compassion. So that means seal of Dharma means it keeps yourself from preventing the suffering of others overwhelming you. You got lots of people, they want the suffering to be stopped without knowing what is the cause of the suffering. So even if they don't want suffering and they want to stop the suffering, because they don't know the cause of it, what they're doing might be the cause of it. So if their own afflictive emotions are causing it and they don't know about it, then of course the person who went to rescue pulled the person further into the water. Of course that is not called rescuing. That is called drowning. Often lots of people do these things, They thought they helped somebody. They showered with gifts to their mother or daughter or something. But they gave them with a lot of resentment, a lot of attachment, a lot of expectation, and then the beneficiary didn't benefit from that, and then neither of them benefit. Both drowned in the ocean of samsara. So that's pitiful, isn't it? That is the object of compassion. If you have realized the first seal of Dharma, you can truly then treasure the teaching of compassion. You can see the more you understand suffering, that much fitter you become able to practice compassion. Compassion is not a standalone virtue. It's a virtue that needs a benefactor. The benefactor are sufferings of sentient beings. And they're not pleasant. But because it's not a pleasant work, doesn't mean it is difficult. It should be discarded. Good work is done in unpleasant situations. The heaven is a just illusory place. Nobody make any benefit up there. This is completely empty. There's nobody there. It's empty population. Zero population in heaven. Work needs to be done here on earth, here on the realm where all sentient beings exist, because there all the difficulties exist. So that's why compassion must be practiced and will be practiced by one who understands suffering and its causes. One who does not understand suffering shows aversion to suffering. Aversion is the cause of suffering. Who knows that? One who understands the first seal of Dharma. Who can stop that? One who understands the second truth of the origin of suffering. Origin of suffering. Because he can put a seal that origin is now not allowed to continue. That is the source. The source has to be stopped. And that cognitive ability to recognize the source as a source and the result as a result. The suffering is the result, source is the affliction. Now, when you know these first two truths, these are first two truths, quite different from Four Seals of Dharma, what we call first two noble truth of suffering and noble truth of origin. The origin of suffering is apprehended, which is the affliction. That's the realization, the first seal of Dharma. And then knowing that stoppability of the origin is due to realizing the second truth, second seal of Dharma. Everything being impermanent, there is no affliction, there is a curse of eternity. Even afflictions are impermanent. So give each other a break. Don't say that you've been angry to me and I can't forgive you. People think that being angry to at once is the end of their ability to talk again and be friend again. It's ridiculous. We're human beings. We're supposed to see that we have such emotion arise and no longer there. Why do we feel so committed to afflictions so much? And so if something, one angry feeling was there, one should learn to remedy that with the compassion. Then one understands not only the truth of origin of suffering, but one knows how to make the ill will impermanent. Even goodwill meditation is to make the ill will go away, to unsit the ill will. Otherwise, goodwill meditation, loving kindness meditation, forgiveness, pardon, all these things are impermanent practices to make the opposite impermanent. These are practical applications, things that the one does. That's why it's no point believing in them or saying some rounds of prayers. They will have some kind of reasonable benefit, because at least one who believes in them is doing it. But most importantly is cognitive. Cognitive means knowledge. One needs to know why one's saying the prayer. And prayer is set for that purpose, to realize what we heard, to deepen our conviction, what we read, what we heard, and what we contemplated. And we try to renew and revalidate this. Each time we pray, each time we meditate, each time we breathe, we sit quietly, we try to revalidate, re-educate ourselves with these principles. That's almost the seals of Dharma, particularly the first two. This is the main topic. First two, learning to make things impermanent. Perception has to be made impermanent. Feeling about the perception will become them impermanent. Thoughts about that, beliefs, opinions about that has to be made impermanent. No. Not just believing everything is impermanent, everything is impermanent, and then think that tomorrow everything will be different. Yeah, day has changed, but your thought about it hasn't. That's not impermanent. At least the week is honest enough to change the names Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. But the attitude we have are still the same. After a whole week, nothing has changed about that. That thing, that memory, we still haven't changed anything. See, the second seal is difficult. But more the difficult, the more liberatingly useful they are. Once you do break the deadlock, you need to know where to hit the key point, where you have to hit at a very crucial place, You've got to break the axle. No point hitting at the spokes. No point hitting at the rim of the wheel. You hit at the axle. So when you can apprehend that very clearly, there's kind of a, not only believing in that, your language in which you think and which you perceive, This is not just being, when you're meditating or when you're doing Buddhist things that you think like that. No, it's everyday life. You can see the afflictive emotions are root cause of suffering. So that makes everyone responsible, which is so powerful. Because otherwise, this materialistic society, always try to prove one as the cause of everything. That everybody is a victim, Which is so idealistic and never practically possible. It never is. They said they convict the person, but everybody's suffering. So if the convicted person is the cause of suffering, then everybody should be liberated, isn't it? Because that is the apprehended cause of suffering, Everybody should be liberated. No, they don't get liberated. They too are all held at ransom by their own affliction. They are not aware of it. So how many people were liberated? None. What we wasted? Too much. Money, resources, time, everything but wasted for nothing but to multiply and to perpetuate the suffering further. That is the very cause of compassion. Not just the suffering, but the naivety, the childishness, the inaptitude of what we may call very educated people, very technically very skilled people in certain areas of life, so knowledgeable, so skilled. But when it comes to their own mind and their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, so inapt. And because these are not taught, this is not shown, this is not explained in a kind of early enough in their life. And they're all taught to react. They're all taught to point finger. They're all taught to see how can you make the other person responsible. All this externally hunting for something without looking at the world how it is manifestation of the thoughts and feelings and emotions, unreliable emotions, with which one has allowed to rule and overrule. This deep thinking, we have to take a back seat from real life daily, and then try to consider how to find a new method to deal with these things. You will find some degree of tolerance looming in you, because you're not trying to fix problem by stoning somebody. You're trying to understand the makeup of the problem, rather than understanding of the problem solves the problem, not hating the problem. Hating the problem makes additional problem. Because it's already understood in the first seal of Dharma. We've done that many times. Now let's try again. We've done this many times. You can tell the friend that we've done this many times. Let's not go over there. Let's look at how we can make it impermanent. When you look at impermanent over your relationship with people, what you were doing, what you're not doing, and you can see all the things we did and like a dream. We no longer have those things with us. Yeah, people can change. Right now it may seem very daunting, but within days, you will see how quickly your views are changing. Your perception, your feelings, your reaction, your opinions are changing. When you see that, when you witness that, you can see a new person is looming, manifesting. Yeah? We're talking about change. We're entitled to change. People say, I'm a changed person. Only in the clothes we're talking about? Yeah, I changed. People say, yeah, you just changed the clothes. But that's the clothes we're talking about. We're talking about the change, the attitude, opinions, and beliefs, and perceptions about things, particularly those pressing issues about which that we have been struggling. Then you have dharma to use. I use the word dharma as a verb. You have dharma. Dharma, yes. You have applied the dharma. It's like you have applied the peanut butter on the bread. Then it looks like part of the bread. Like when you apply the dharma on your life, the flavor of it, the medicine of it, softens your whole aggressive mind to see the futility of the aggression. And then you see, because it's an affliction. Affliction does not solve affliction. So when you practice a little bit of peace, a little bit of forgiveness, and out of compassion, when your capacity to begin compassion is increased, then the benefit of the first seal of Dharma is now translated into your behavior. You're more compassionate. Why? Because your anger has turned into goodwill. See, not only suffering has made you become compassionate, your own ill will, with usually resentment, now have become goodwill. And you have made your emotion into intelligent emotion. Previously destructive, benumbing, imprisoning affliction, now intelligent, liberative, enlightened emotions of a sympathetic joy, of compassion, of forgiveness, of understanding. These are also emotions, but these are intelligent ones. These are cognitive. These are very, very empowering. These are liberative art. These are art of art, Buddha is the highest artist. You can do all kinds of art with brush strokes, but wait until you can change your thoughts and stroke of your thoughts, how you can change the image of people around you, things around you. That's art that you can't witness with your naked eyes, but you've got to meditate. But your meditation, meditation means how to stay present and nurture that, like hatching an egg. Just believe in the law of impermanence. That everything is impermanent, and I'll make quite a few of my own views and opinions impermanent. It's not sitting well when I'm still holding wrong, unkind views about someone so long. This is so big, so imprisoning of me. I must break this jail. I must break this self-imprisoned situation. I must make it impermanent. Then meditate. Just recognize the subject over which you want to make it impermanent. Cognitively, not just thinking it's bad for you to have those views, but tell why they are harmful. Explain to yourself very clearly until you are totally persuaded, until you're totally brainwashed. You've got to completely change what is the contents in your mind. Until you change your mind, you continue to hold the views. The teaching of Dharma is to change. They're just like a soap. They'll wash you. You've got to allow it few rinses. Not the first rinse, not working very well. Maybe gentle wash first, and slowly super wash, and then another rinse. And then a few days later, you look at the same issue or object or people, you really don't see them anymore same way. What a nice relief. It's just like you had an eye operation. You had a mind operation. You definitely had a cognitive operation. That's why the guy who wrote the book, who in the 60s, it was very 60s, 70s, his books were famous. Lopsang Rampa, and he wrote a third eye, and a number of other books. Maybe many of you not so familiar with it. He said that he went to Lhasa. His books are all fiction, of course, but the contents is not fiction. It's Dharma. He says he went to Lhasa, and he went to college where they did a brain operation of him. And then after the operation, he saw everything very different, he said. So what he meant is that he studied Dharma. And as a result of that, he changed the view of all the things and everything around him. And he saw everything. He's not himself anymore. What he saw were completely different. And that's exactly what meditation does. When you allow the meditation to occur, slowly the meditation on impermanence or unsatisfactoriness, whatever that is, slowly it's just like a water purifying tablet. It slowly purifies your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. In so doing, you no longer have the same attitudes or perceptions. And then this kind of meditation, after a while, your mind has become more conducive to embrace this body of knowledge. So one must challenge, if we understand these first two seals of Dharma, we must, because first seal is about suffering and its origin, therefore the antidote for that is compassion to sentient beings and their suffering, whether this shows in their behavior or effects of it in sentient beings. Only remedy for that is compassion, not aversion, not punitive, not ostracizing anyone, because they are themselves afflictions. So that therefore seals us, stops us from karmically reacting. So that's the first one. And if we understand the second seal of Dharma, see, it's about us knowing that everything being impermanent, I can also change, my view of this and my thoughts, my feelings, my perception. Therefore, I don't have to stay stuck in one awkward, miserable position. I can vary my positions, and as a result of that, free myself, unsit my untenable position of anger or negativities. So afflictions are root cause of suffering, but they are possible to be made impermanent, made redundant. Made no longer current. Why? The afflictions are transformable into wisdoms. This is amazing. If suffering is transformable to become cause of compassion, not cause of aversion,
When one is afflicted, one doesn't see the suffering as a cause of compassion. One is not able to see that. One sees the suffering as cause of aversion. Anyone who has suffering around with, people just complain. People straight away go away or run away, or as if that is the suffering, that they themselves are too good to be near people who are suffering. Amazing. But those who truly understand the suffering, they have to be responsible to attend to their loved ones, particularly those we have karmic responsibility to. When they become old and needy and frail and dependent, do we just go away, leave them? That looks like escapism. That doesn't look like compassion at all. So, therefore, people suffer from old age, sickness, aloneness, and destitution, and so on. We must be kind to them. We must be compassionate to them, not see them as a burden, not see them as a dependent, and say, I got a dependent, as independent is the way to go. It's just ridiculous. Go and live in Mars, then you will be very independent. You wouldn't even get there. See how independent possible? No possible. Independent is an illusory word, and reality is even more illusory. See, independent and this individualism is a cause of suffering. Why the people in the first world, people become more supposedly independent, become more miserable. They have to have someone to do things for and with. And if they don't want that, that's the pause. That's the problem. They don't want to practice tolerance. They don't want to practice generosity. They don't want to practice diligence. They don't want to develop understanding. So where are they going to grow? They don't grow. Seed doesn't grow in the middle of the air. Seed grows amidst the resistance of the soil and the water and the fertile and lack of it. Seed is pushed from all sides of the, and then it makes grow. So like that, a person who understands suffering does not run away. That suffering people are too bad for us, for bad to them. They can't be. They are so good, they can't be around suffering people and people who have problems. Amazing. Where is such a restricted place? Where is such a special place reserved for people? That's called nirvana, a very lonely place. That's why in Mahayana Buddhism never recommended to go there. Because individualists who want to have personal liberation go there. I don't know whether they got there or not, but they try to go there. So that's why we need to, when we understand the first two seals of Dharma, we become a lot more conversant in compassion, in relation to the first, even more conversant with second, because we know how to make our ill will and our aversion and resentment more impermanent. See, now we are not on these things. See, the earth or soil or weather and people are impermanent. We can make our emotion impermanent. So now we master. We know exactly how to transmute it. It's not about distraction of emotions that's supposed to destroy us, but transmutation of the emotions. Previous kind of wasted form of emotion and blaming and anger and resentment, now instead of blaming, to accept blame, accepting the blame, accept some share of blame. It will lighten the burden of others. And when you start doing that, it will make yourself practice tolerance. See, if tolerance is virtue, so is acceptance. But when one is reacting and overreacting, it's called irritation, it's called impatience. And impatience is not a virtue. It's a behavior of affliction of hate. Hate cannot remedy hate. So when one practices compassion, one is making the hate impermanent. So the practice of the first two seals of Dharma shouldn't be just beliefs here, but when one tries to live them. So challenge ourselves to
to use these two themes at certain areas of life and try to show compassion to the things you're not happy about. And try to make the resentment and ill will towards that instead gratitude and forgiveness towards that. Then we are actually not just ideologically believing in these teachings, but emotionally actually are working and transmuting the practice. Then you can see, when we say impermanence death, you can see the death of past emotions, stories. You don't want to go near there. You don't want to resuscitate. You don't want to rebirth the past sufferings. You don't go in the past because it's already dead. It's finished. And it's meditate on impermanence and death, they call it. Not just death of a body and spirit they're separating. Death of the thought about that. Death of the beliefs about that. Death of the wrong views and opinion about that. One should stop them. Then you are not dying, you are living. You're causing death of afflictive emotions, you're actually living much more. Your body likes it, your mind likes it, your emotion likes it. You feel actually physically, emotionally much lighthearted because you're not weighed down by the dense and tense negativities. So, hence the first two seals of Dharma makes us, I would say, karmically and emotionally a little bit lighter to be able to digest the third seal of Dharma, which we will explore next week. So, any questions, comments? If you have, you might allow a few minutes.
How do people become so afflicted? So, what's the cause, conditions for affliction?
Yeah, good. The afflictions are mainly the not knowing the nature of the afflictions and how the conditions exposed to them are contribute to the afflictions. So people are not able to avoid negative conditions. They become pulled towards that. They don't know how to avoid places or spaces or time or association and conversations and activities that are very afflictive. When those people who are become more mindful, they realize even afflictions are not inherent, Afflictions are also conditioned. So one needs to learn how to decondition the afflictions. One try to give more time to practice, more time to have time with yourself, and with good company of thoughts. Even with the even being oneself is not really good company. Lots of people's problem is because they are spending too much time with themselves. They're not making useful of themselves with others. A lot of depression is too much thinking of me. So if one goes out and do a few things physically, occasionally or periodically, then one might be influenced by positive people and how they are, their diligence, their good work, their commitment. When you see these things, they realize, I too can learn a little bit, do a little bit, maybe not as much as them, but do a little bit. Then, of course, one becomes a little bit more positively influenced. But when one is spending too much time in a space and place with thoughts, beliefs, and ideas that are all wrong and bad ideas and maybe no help at all, then the people become so afflicted. And then they have behaviors that itself makes the affliction deep become. And they may resort to drug and alcohol, gambling, and bad companion, bad conversations, no useful, meaningful conversations, no enlightening conversation, no useful. And then when they're exposed to the very deluded perceptions, then that's what the what do we call the environment in where we situate ourselves. So being able to do Dharma activities, listening, studying, practicing periodically in our life will make us a little bit less vulnerable to the afflictions of ourselves as well as afflictions of others. So next time when you see somebody is really, driven and very angry or whatever, instead of being lured by them, instead of being swayed by them, you will see this is what I become when I'm not aware of that. So look how ugly they look, look how awful they look at what they're saying and look they're doing is so awful. I would look even worse than that. So what a pity. So I have to be kind and compassionate and not being reactive and being righteous about them. So when you're doing that, see, then even though we are exposed to someone's affliction, we actually grew much from there. Rather than idealizing, I should be in a place where I should be surrounded by nice, loving, kind, courteous, sort of polite people. But in such place, people get spoiled also. So, of course, most people would prefer that, but they don't realize sometimes we learn only in difficult situations more than in comfortable situations. So there is an ideal place or space if we have a good set of mind that there's a bodhisattva learn in difficulties. ordinary people decline in pleasant situations. So see whether one's knowledge itself is so intelligent enough to not become afflicted by things around oneself. Company, they say, company is very important. Topic of conversation is very important. And where and when and how frequent one does these things are important. And if one does too many of these with too many same negative places or objects, then one becomes afflicted by the influence of it. It's just like cloth that hasn't been changed many days and become dirty more quickly. But the cloth that is washed, regularly, not wearing too many days, it's one gentle wash, it makes it clean. There which are deeply soaked and soiled by things, it's difficult to wash. So that's why it's important to give periodical training and practice to ourselves, exposed to places and situations where we can find remedy for these situations. Because afflictions are also not permanently something in itself. They're just conditions. When you see that, when you know the afflictions are impermanent, then you don't label somebody, oh, he's such a violent person. You don't say these things. Because a lot of people do that. They say, he's a violent person. Because he may have been violent once or twice. People think he's violent always. And put the stigma and give them a curse, basically. Curse to each other by labeling like that. And that person isn't allowed to think there have been a lot of time he's been very kind, maybe a lot of time very selfless and very generous, and they don't explain to others, oh, this is a generous person, this is a violent person, And society stigmatizes each other, and that causes affliction. So much negative reporting, negative stigmas causes huge damage to the morale and confidence for people, permission to change themselves, because they think that's what they are. They don't realize even self is not itself. What could they be? Why they are like that? They don't need to be like that anymore. They definitely have to believe in change. And so where there is a lot of kind of wrong doctrine of eternal heaven or eternal hell, and that's where it makes people think they are like that. Everything is impermanent. In Buddhism, the eternity is never taught to seek. One needs to remain in this transient world to be of useful, not try to find an eternal heaven for oneself.
it's almost a taboo. And what would be the benefit of that to reach there anyway? Even reaching of that will be impossible because it's eternal. How could eternal can be reached? Eternal cannot be reached. Who is the reacher? So eternal have to have a person. Person cannot reach eternal because eternal has to have a very permanent population. What eternity means is you cannot increase the population. Okay, we'll conclude here. We'll stop here with dedication marriage on page 11, saying these prayers for people and places who do not become exposed to these teachings and ways, often struggle under the afflictions. May our hearing these teachings, open hearts and minds as little though we have attempted. May this slowly unfold all the things. So with this we offer. By the merit of this, may we attain the state of omniscience and defeat the evil enemies and defilements. May I liberate all sentient beings from the samsaric oceans, the turbulent waves of birth, old death, sickness, and death. By listening to the excellent and precious mind and teachings, whatever boundless merit I have acquired, may all sentient beings become precious and stainless vessels to retain the excellent and precious mind and teachings. May the supreme and precious bodhicitta take birth who had not done so. Where it has been born, may it increase abundantly without degeneration. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.